Welcome back to That Rugby podcast. Just me again. Yes, Hughesy on holiday for one more week. Hopefully back next week for the podcast. But we've had a big weekend, a massive weekend of international footy. Southern Hemisphere, our hemisphere, dominated. And let's talk about it. Jump straight in. First game of the week. First major game of the week. I'm not going to touch too much on the Samoa games, the Fijian games. Purely, I didn't watch enough of the footy to discuss it. The other ones I have watched enough of to be able to discuss it. So we're going to jump straight into the New Zealand versus England game. Wow, what a game. Now, what I once said is people were going to judge the first performance of Razor's reign, and probably, I think a little bit harshly. This English team is a lot better than anyone's expected. A lot better than... This English team, I should say, is better than what England has previously been. This English team is building, obviously took another step in the Six Nations and took another step in this game, I think, were very good. Obviously, a couple of Marcus Smith kicks away from winning this game, realistically, and kickable kicks. So what I sit there and go, I don't know, for those who don't know, most New Zealanders probably don't know this, Henry Slade, who played 13 for the English, I believe was top point scorer or best goal kicker in the premiership this year. So there'll be some questions with that. I mean, it doesn't distinctly need to be the 10 kicking goals. So take some pressure off Marcus Smith and give it to a man who's capable. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do that. For England, they came out, they played their rush defence like they have. They made the game tough for the All Blacks and I think played really well and were thereabouts to earn the victory there. But didn't get it done. Razor, in his first game for the All Blacks, gets a win for them. Now, you've got to remember the last time we played England, it was a 25-all draw, I believe, after being up 25-0. And then the time before that was the semi-final in the 2019 World Cup. So we haven't faced each other a lot. The build-up to this game was fantastic. The atmosphere, I think, was fantastic. The feeling in the game was fantastic. A lot of really good moments in the game. Starting with the New Zealanders, who I think stood out. TJ Perenara for the first 40 minutes, I think controlled the game really well, kicked well, just seems to be back at that level he was pre-leaving for Japan and before the injury. And it was awesome to see him out there. Obviously now injured, will cause a bit of a rethink, but yeah, definitely good to see him back out there. For our wingers, we've got two of the best wingers in the world at the moment. Mark Talia just seems to be unable to be tackled by the first man, and Severis. It is so good as well to see. Obviously, he was our starting winger in 2019, missed the World Cup due to injury for 2023. Came back last year, was incredible for the Crusaders this year, should I say, and has taken that form straight into the international rugby. A couple of bone tackling hits on George Furbank was just fantastic. So thought those two were really good. I thought Peter Feta, I love the fact that he's been given an opportunity to play, and even in 15 looked very good. Is he our best 15? Maybe not, but he stood up to show that he's at test ability and test level with his performance in that game. I thought the front row struggled a bit, all of them at scrum time. We dominated at scrum time, but apparently it was illegal. And again, I'm not one to talk too much on scrums because it's a bit like wizardry for me as a scrum half, fly half back who doesn't know too much. But yeah, we were giving away penalties, and unfortunately I had the unfortunate, opportunity, unfortunate service of having to listen to the English commentators, which is just fantastic when you're not supporting England. And I'm not... Vice versa. If I was English, I would love listening to them probably because they sat there and talked up England. Just as Kiwis, we don't mind listening to Justin Marshall get a bit, patriotic and back the All Blacks. But having to listen to the English commentary, and they were very critical of De Groot scrummaging and giving away penalties, and it showed a couple of times there. So they'll probably work that out. I think we're still the dominant scrum, but I don't think those props probably had their best performances. Damien McKenzie up and down, obviously the time wasting at the end. He had his moments in the game, but yeah, not enough to kind of solidify his jersey, his 10 jersey. Same with Marcus Smith. I think if he kicks those kicks, he probably can put his hand up a bit more, but missing those kicks, hard to say they solidify the jersey. even harder for England now as they go into Eden Park. I thought Faye Waboso was very good on the English wing. Again, a very Sevu Reese-like performance, made some good tackles, really tough to tackle with ball in hand, played very well for the English. And again, it heightened my belief that Alex Mitchell is one of the best nines in the world with his performance, alongside a up-and-coming locker who I think will be very good, and George Martin, and then Finn Baxter came on early doors, had to play about 60-plus minutes against one of the best rugby sides in the world, and didn't look out of place as a 22-year-old, 14-year-old looking prop. So yeah, a lot of goods, I think, to come from England. Really tough for them to go to Eden Park now and try and get a win, but they'll be up for it. Moving on to the next game, Australia versus Wales. Wales obviously struggling to get a win. I think I saw Rugby Plus release a stat that it's been like 274 days since Wales have won a game, which I assume dates all the way back to the quarterfinal at the Rugby World Cup. Looking back at it would be my assumption. When they they lost the quarterfinal, so it must have been back to all the way to the Rugby World Cup pool stage, because they lost the quarterfinal to Argentina. So then they headed to Australia, where Australia, under Joe Smith's first game, new guidance. Well, Australia, let's start with Australia. Liam Wright was named captain during the week, and I think it's a great naming, and we'll get Hughes' opinion on this when he gets back, but I think it was a great naming. He's very John Eales-like to me. Very reminiscent of, one of those lock leaders. I know he's playing six for the Wallabies, but had a fantastic performance in this game, and I really like that selection. A bit out there because, he hasn't played a lot of rugby for the Wallabies, but it showed that he deserved to be there. Bobby Valentini, I think, had a fantastic game. The Wallabies as a whole, watching their defence, I don't know what it was, if it was intent or their structures. I'm still probably trying to work that out myself, but they came out and wanted to hurt people, and not in the taking people out off the ball or anything like that, but when they made contact, they wanted to win that contact, and they did win that contact, and that's why they won the game. I just thought, their forward pack fronted up brilliantly. I think Lukan Solakailotu is one of those, we've always said you need a bit of a cunt, a bit of a bastard in there, and he will push and shove, and he will fight to the bitter end. I thought Jerry Williams was very good for a debutant. A lot of debuts came out of this game, and I thought they all put their hands up and backed up what they needed. The man, you couldn't be any more happier for Tom Wright. I think his try, we've talked about it heavily on this podcast. Tom Wright is a test level caliber player when he's playing for the Brumbies, but it's never quite converted, and his try was just sensational. We watched that step about 72 times on replays, like the step on the fullback as he scored his try, and you just go, I'm glad for him, because even as a New Zealander, you see talent like Tom Wright when he's put on some Brumbies jersey, you just hope it can carry over, and for it to actually carry over, I thought was fantastic for him. Wales, on the other hand, Wainwright was incredible. His hit up was a thing of beauty, takes you back to league, and played and was everywhere around the field. Look, Wales are going for a rebuild. They're trying to find what works. I think they stuck in this game better than they did against the Springboks, but again, it shows that their second half performances are just not up to scrap. They were 13-10 down at halftime, only able to score, 6 more points, and they allowed, another 12 in. So they're thereabouts, but it's just, to get a win, it's going to take more from this Welsh side. They have another big test again against the Wallabies. The same Wallabies, especially on defence, turn up. It's going to be really hard to beat. Main event time, South Africa versus Ireland, the one we'd all been waiting for. I only have caught the replay of this because I was playing a sevens tournament during the game. Look, South Africa wins, and they won when they needed to, 27-20. It's hard to get a read on this game. There's so many moments you could talk about, from the TMO calls to the Casey injury to, the bomb squad coming on, Ireland probably dominating that set piece early till then the Springboks stealing it late with one of the better pushover tries you'll see against an international level opponent. I don't know what to make of it all. It it's one of those ones where I think two heavyweights just kept throwing punches and eventually someone landed the knockout blow. And I don't even know if a knockout blow was landed. But South Africa deserved winners in my mind. Let's talk quickly about that Casey incident. Look, for all those that saying this is payback for Pat Lambie are just stupid. Stop that, all right? This is not what that is. RG Snyman, again, he's taken him off the ball, yes, but forwards as a whole, and especially not just South African forwards, locks in particularly, play at another higher level. And I mentioned this when we were talking about Scott Barrett as captaincy. They play at a whole nother level, and I think he just went through with a tackle. Probably could have been a penalty. I don't think much more than that could be given because it is a tackle off the ball, but the way that Casey has been injured is hitting his head. And you never want to see those type of injuries, and I think it could have been prevented, but it's hard to tell a player at that level to stop trying to finish a tackle when his head's down making a tackle. So I guess, yeah, look, I'm indifferent on the opinions of both. Like the South Africans is coming in and standing up for their player, and I get it. I don't think you can compare this to the Pat Lambie incident, and I don't think you should. The Irish are standing up for their player, which I totally understand as well. I don't know where I would sit if a New Zealander was on either side of this. So that's my thought on that. I'm interested to hear everyone's opinions on that though as well. The 6-2 split has also been discussed heavily, and I've said this before. I've got no problem with it. I can't remember who said it, but someone said it's, rugby's a game for everyone, and a 6-2 split takes away from the backs. And I disagree to a point. I think up in an age grade level, there should be a capped number of 5 to 3 or however you want to split it. I think they have 3 reserves. So under 20s, all the way up to age grade, I think you've got to say, here's a split of your bench that you have to have. Once we get into professional rugby, shut the fuck up. They can... 6-2 split is fine. You have to find tactical ways to win this game. And just because South Africa can do it so well with the 4-pack that they've got, to me, it was silly to say that they can't do that. I think they definitely have to be allowed to do that. I would argue the difference that I would make is I would legitimately say you could only make 5 subs or do something like that. But to sit there and say they can't manipulate the bench to the way they want to me is just silly. But I would also love to hear people's thoughts on that. I think South Africa use it best because it works well with them. They have these enormous players that can, go for 50 minutes max, and then they can bring on players to deliver in the 30 minutes, and it showed. James Lowe probably had one of his poorer performances. I don't think Ireland actually played that well, which I think they'll be disappointed about. Nor do I think South Africa played their best rugby as well. But you get a win. Winning in these games, and especially when it's 1v2 in the world, is the most important thing. How both teams back up. I know Ireland are going through a bit of an injury crisis now. Will be really interesting how they line up for the next test. What Razzie decides to do for the next test as well will be really interesting. And on that as well, Caelan Doris, I think, is a phenomenal player. Probably one of the best players in the world at the moment. And I just think he's not getting enough credit as well for his performance in that game. The last of the international, main top-tier internationals with Scotland touring Americas, and I think Italy going on tour with European-based teams, with Pacific-based teams, and all of that, was the Argentina versus France game. The only game I didn't watch, but the baby French team, I don't even know if they're the baby French team, but the reserve French team, basically, because the French don't send their top-tier players away for these tours, won a game against Argentina, with Argentina's first game since the Rugby World Cup semi-final. Not a lot to say on this. Again, I think this is going to be one of those tours that runs under the radar. It's another good international footy tour there to bring out some discussion points. But those other 3 are the ones we're here for and mainly watching. And if you disagree with me, really try and make a point. Argentina, I think, named 9 new players from the squad that weren't in the squad in the World Cup. France send over a B team. What is there to discuss here? These are games that just mean that players are getting minutes. Saying all of this, the debate now rages on North versus South Hemisphere rugby. Again, 5v1 in the whole tally of it, I believe, with Samoa beating Italy, Fiji beating Georgia, I believe. Don't quote me on that. Quote me on that. Because that's right. And then, obviously, we look at all the other results that we've discussed. Australia beating Wales, New Zealand beating England, South Africa beating Ireland, and France only one to pick up a winner. And the reason I want to discuss this point, obviously they're going to the Southern Hemisphere. I get that. That's home field advantage. It all makes sense. But the Six Nations has already happened, so these teams have already played a decent amount of rugby together versus all of the Southern Hemisphere playing their first games since the World Cup, except for South Africa who played Wales last week. But even that, this is their first block of international rugby. Who do we think gets the advantage? And I know I get it. It's hard to say. If these were neutral venues, what would happen? But I do wonder who gets the advantage because they've played that Six Nations rugby. Are they at an advantageous situation because they've played more recently together? But then you're also looking at the end of a long season for them, a long slog for a lot of them. Like the Premiership lads just wrapped up their final, top 14. Obviously, France we're not really talking too much about. But the URC wrapping up all of their stuff. Super Rugby doesn't last as long. Obviously, kicks off in February, finishes there. They're coming to the end of, I think someone was saying Marcus Smith is at the end of his 14th month cycle now. So, because he would have started pre-World Cup there, come all the way back around, that's a lot of rugby. Let's not get this wrong. So, is it advantageous that the All Blacks and stuff and all those Southern Hemisphere teams haven't played since the Rugby World Cup? Who actually goes in with the advantage here? I would love to know your opinion because I sit there and I would have thought the Six Nations would have helped all these teams. It was mentioned, especially in the All Black setup, and even Australia's, all three of them, Australia, South Africa and All Blacks. I know Rosie's been in there, but new coaching setup, so new game plans, new setups, new whole philosophy coming in. Would have thought that would have led to a bit more rustiness, but all three teams pick up wins over teams that have been doing it now for some of them for 14 months. So we'd love to know your thoughts on who takes the advantage in these games as we go on. It's looked like the South has obviously had the advantage in this first week. Another week to go will be interesting to see if it ends in 5-1 again and to 10-2 slog over the weekends over the summer tour. So a lot to discuss there probably after this week with Husey to see. Is there another way to set this up to make it a fair competition? Is this a fair competition and the North just need to produce better? Saying that, the under-20s, obviously last year the under-20s was a big talking point, and the reason it was a big talking point was the absolute dominance of the Six Nations teams versus the non-Six Nations teams. So if we saw it, France, Ireland, England and South Africa were the under-20s teams to make the semi-finals last year. So France made it over the New Zealand under-20s in their pool. England and Ireland had the Australian under-20s in their pool. South Africa had Georgia, Argentina and Italy. So the lesser of the opponents in their pool. And France going on to beat Ireland in that game and South Africa finishing third was the top team. So then this year, the Southern Hemisphere teams decided to do the under-20s rugby championship to bring the game, I would say, trying to get the under-20s something before, because the under-20s in the Northern Hemisphere have the Six Nations. We have nothing. Have we already caught up is my question. New Zealand, I know they beat France in a last-minute penalty that went to a TMO decision, but they won. They beat France, who are defending champions. And I know under-20s, you've got to take it at a holistic view because every year is different. You have those under-20s that were previously now moving on because they're over 20. So you've got to say each year group might be different. But New Zealand beat France and beat Wales, taking on Spain to probably qualify. Australia, I know, lost to Italy, but beat Georgia, have a game against Ireland that could decide their fate. And then you look at South Africa lost to Argentina, but both of them, South Africa, have beaten Fiji and now playing England to decide on that. But they seem more prepped. Yes, I know the Australian loss to Italy is probably the more devastating one, but New Zealand looked prepped, and you could argue, I would just about argue there's some more talent in that New Zealand team from last year. So have those under-20s teams for the Southern Hemisphere made ground on their components after only 1 year of the Rugby Championship? I think so. And I think that under-20s Rugby Championship will grow into a really, really good tournament, and similar to what you see from the Six Nations at the moment. And I'm excited for it. I think, I'm a big supporter of Southern Hemisphere rugby. over our northern brothers. And I'm hoping that if Australia can get up over Ireland and push for a semi-final spot, and even South Africa get up over England, and we start to see who can qualify out of that pool, it's all on. The English under-20 team is looking very, very dangerous. I believe won the Six Nations tournament. I don't know who they lost the game to. I'm assuming Ireland, or maybe in France. It's a tight affair, as we all know, and we see. If you don't understand how the under-20 tournament works, there's like 2 or 3 divisions, I believe. Scotland are tearing it up in the second division. That didn't qualify for the first division. So, yeah, look, I just sit there and I go, I think we've already made up the ground again, just by having one tournament pre-handing and letting these players get together. And I'm all for it. I think the quicker you can expose these younger players to these types of tournament, the better it is for them and the better it is for the growth of rugby. And I would say, as I mentioned earlier, I would. This is the time to trial rules. This is the time to say rugby is for everyone. I would say it's a 5-3 split on the bench. You've got to do this, do that. Rugby is for everyone up until the under-20 level. And then as they move into the professional game, you're now a professional. This is how we attack the sport. This is how the sport is. So, look, I'm excited for the finals of these as we get there. I think tomorrow kicks off the final round robin matches, and then we'll get finals and placings and seedings from that. But has the Southern Hemisphere under-20s already made ground? We've won Rugby Championship tournament. Interesting to know. Last few points today. First one, Dan McKellar to the Waratahs. My mate Hughesy, I have to shout this out for him. Dan McKellar was very good at Brumbies in the bracketed Wallabies job discussion pre-Joe Smith, but was with the Leicester Tigers for this year. Was meant to be doing a 2-year deal, got let go early. Obviously, they didn't get the results that they were looking for. Always very hard, I think, for a Southern Hemisphere coach to come over and coach if you don't get results straight away. So isn't doing his second year, has come home early, and the Waratahs have made a great statement on picking him. He's got results at Super Rugby level with the Brumbies, and is seen as a very, very good coach. Obviously, another man that was bracketed for this job is Michael Cheika, who's actually taken the Leicester Tigers job. So it's a bit of a roundabout type ways. McKellar ends up with the Waratahs, who are needing someone like him to rebuild. I think Hughesy will be very happy with that. But we'll get his emotions next week. Lastly, Richie Mo'unga has come out and said, look, I'm interested. I've heard Razor. I've heard Daddy Razor has been talking me up in the media, interested, and it's made me think, look, I've got a 3-year deal, but is there still potential? Now, it gets me excited. Why? Because I think under Razor, Richie and Razor, the double R's, could take the All Blacks to the 2027 Rugby World Cup final in glory. Glory, I'm talking about glory now. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm happy D-Mac gets this opportunity. I'm happy with everything Richie's done for us. He hasn't obviously won in Rugby World Cups, but it's a different ballgame with Razor as coach. And I think there's already been a lot of talk about the enthusiasm around Razor and what he's delivered to this All Black team and what he's brought, the atmosphere, the changing of the guard type situation. So if Richie's interested, I'm interested. And if I'm interested, we all should be interested as All Blacks fans. But I would love to know, what do we think with Richie Mo'unga potentially making an All Blacks comeback? Does he slot right back in? I could see him again still. And this is why I think he's one of the best club rugby players in the world ever to just about do it. The fact that he can go over to Japan, win a title, I just sit there and I go, wow, he's a talent. Can Razor get the best out of him and get us to a Rugby World Cup final? I totally believe so. Can he win it? I totally believe so. What would it add to our team to have, again, Richie Mo'unga back for another World Cup? A very experienced campaigner who's done it, been there before. Do we want him back? I think so. But that has been That Rugby Podcast. I am Luke. I'm one half of the podcast, flying solo yet again today. Hopefully we'll be back again next week with Hughesy. It might be a later in the week podcast, purely because I think Hughesy gets back earlier in the week, or I might do one more of these by myself and then bring Hughesy, give him an extra week to recover from the holiday of dreams. But for now, thank you for joining me. I will see you next time, same place, same time. Good.